Who were the mighty men of old in Genesis 6, and why does their existence matter so much for understanding Genesis and the Bible's bigger story? The sons of God were supernatural beings who crossed forbidden boundaries and had children with human women. But what about their offspring? Genesis 6:4 says, "The Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterward, when the sons of God came in to the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown." The word Nephilim comes from the Hebrew word meaning to fall. It likely means fallen ones, although it also carries the sense of powerful or terrifying beings. These Nephilim were more than just large or strong humans. They were a hybrid corruption of God's creation, part divine rebel, part human. In the ancient world, beings like these were remembered in the myths of the nations. Mighty heroes, giants, men with extraordinary power. But the Bible doesn't romanticize them. It portrays them as part of the reason the earth was filled with violence and wickedness. When we look later in the biblical story, we find echoes of the Nephilim in the conquest of Canaan. In Numbers 13, 32, 33, the spies report seeing giants in the land. "All the people that we saw in it are of great height, and there we saw the Nephilim, and we seemed to ourselves like grasshoppers." Even generations after the flood, the memory, and perhaps the lingering reality of these beings remained. Ancient giants like the Anakim and the Rephaim show up as opponents of Israel, representing obstacles to the fulfillment of God's promises. The Nephilim are a symbol of unnatural power, rebellion, and opposition to God's plan. In Genesis 6, they represent the peak of humanity's corruption, not just people sinning individually, but creation itself being polluted at the level of flesh and blood. This is why God's judgment must be so severe. The flood is not an overreaction. It is a necessary act to reset and preserve humanity from utter ruin. Without understanding the role of the Nephilim, the seriousness of the flood becomes difficult to grasp. But not everyone accepts this supernatural reading. Many have proposed alternative theories, often out of discomfort with the idea of divine beings producing offspring. Let's tackle those competing interpretations head-on and see why they ultimately fall short of explaining the biblical text.